there are some people that just still say, what's the point of it all? How do you link them in?
I can only speak from my own experience, and from as trapped as I was in the most awful, awful dense patterns that I could ever imagine, I can only say that there was some kernel of pure awareness in me that knew that I could be a better human being. And I started to follow that little trail of breadcrumbs. And it was an arduous, painful journey at first because I had no one to help me. And as I say, conventional psychologists were not helpful to me. So I had to follow just that inner sensibility. And as I got a little bit more freedom, it built on itself. And then I began to see that if I were free, really free, which has been a lifetime path for me, then I would get to see what a human life could actually be, what my human life could actually be. And I just kept following that potential along from the inside out. I know that many people don't feel that yearning, but if that yearning is inside, there's no place to start except the inside of the yearning. And to start pushing out the envelope of those patterns so that you can get enough freedom to be able to see what you might be like if you were free.
It's funny then, and it seems that when someone has a taste of feeling a sense of freedom in their heart and in their life, it's very difficult, I think, to go back to a feeling of accepting compromise, negotiating, all the things that people do in their life to get by. And so, is that true? Do you find that the more people try to hold the curiosity of looking for awareness, that they tend to keep growing?
I think there are a couple levels of what you're bringing up. One is that the truth is only one thing, and that's an ever-evolving feeling. So to negotiate with what feels true to you with other people that say, no, you should be doing this other thing rather than what feels true to you, that's a non-negotiable, and it's a no-brainer. You're just following the one course that feels like the truth to you over and over. But on the other hand, negotiating with what others need becomes something that one can do from the open heart. When we're in a group of people, for example, where there's a lot of differences between temperaments, then we want to put everything on the table and create a big container so there's a lot of room for everybody to be themselves. And then we get to see how all that's going to work together, which would be what a film project would be like if it was done in the free state.
Yeah, I find that happens quite a lot, where I just try to be embracing all the different temperaments, so to speak, so that there is a bridge there, because I believe that that's the highest purpose, is to connect.
Yes.
Even in their ego, to connect, because ultimately people respond to that. They resonate, even if it's for a moment, but they have a feeling that's different. And I think that that's my goal, is to constantly be presented with those opportunities to bridge the differences. I don't know.
And being able to connect over and over and over pulls people into the free state. It's inductive. It says, come over here and we'll be present together. And people go, oh, okay.
Great question. Now, how do you describe the difference between inducting someone at their own pace into a sense of freedom in their life versus projecting certain ideals or concepts to them to try to get them to understand? It's very different. How do you explain?
It's very different. And people's pacing depends on a lot of variables. Some people are, like myself, slow to step into life because their patterns create so much resistance to fully living. And some people just are timid, tentative. It's just their nature. They're shy. A lot of gifted people, for example, are introverted, and they don't come raging into life. They're extremely tentative. And that's a temperamental quality that has to be taken into consideration. That feels very different than patterns and their resistance and people not wanting to embrace life because they've got ideas that life should come on a platter or something else. But that organic pacing is something that has to be, identified by each person.
It's having a respect for their process, isn't it?
It's being able to discern what's ego resistance and what's natural process. Like I'm saying, if people are introverted or shy or tentative or are very measured in the steps that they take, you can really feel the deliberateness of that, and that doesn't feel like resistance, and it doesn't feel like pattern.
So what would be an example of resistance then, as a contrasting state?
People having self-limiting beliefs. That I can't do that, you can do that, I can't do that. Or, this is the best job I can get. Or, I can't be a writer, I'm not good enough, or I don't know how. I mean, you hear a lot of stuff like that, and it literally, what people tell themselves stops life dead in its tracks. And all those kinds of stories cause resistance to just stepping in and starting to write.
Do you find that people get to a point in their lives when there's so much pain because they have not been following their authentic life that they suddenly have to make a choice? Does that happen quite often?
Yes. And that's the stuff nervous breakdowns are made of for gifted people, that they have not been on their path and that their heart is breaking because they're not living an authentic life. And by the time I start to get involved with someone in that kind of a crisis, it's really tough because it's like asking a person to abandon a course of action that they've chosen for, say, 20 years. And now you're saying, why didn't you be a writer all this time? Well, you didn't, so I guess if you want, you're going to have to choose it now. But that means throwing away your pension. It means throwing away your career.
And how do you address the question of survival needs that come up for people, needing a home and to eat and shelter for their family, and yet still pursuing the gifted life of being a writer?
That's where curiosity serves us, because we don't know how life is going to be taken care of until we start researching it in the Free State. Because there's no rules in the Free State, we don't know how each one of us is going to be supported to move forward in life until we leap off the next cliff, and then we get to see where the parachutes sprout out of our arms and backs. We don't know until we get there. So in the Free State, it's always all about taking a baby step so that you can see you're not going to die. But then as you've taken a baby step into the Free State, you get to see how life comes in and supports that risk. And then you can take a bigger step because you've begun to see that there's a natural process in the Free State. And we don't certainly endorse people leaping off of tall buildings until they've taken those baby steps, because everybody needs to see how life gets supported in their own experience.
So for instance, say someone is moving out of their house, they don't have a house or a car anymore, and they can't make any payments in any way to further their dream. I'll call it a dream, how would you help them to get a different job to support the survival needs, or what would you suggest to them to get them?
I'd be sitting down and say, what's next for you? I'd ask. I'd say, what feels like what's next? Now that you're here, what's next? And again, to elicit the answer from their own awareness, not tell them what I think they should do, which is ego-based. I can give advice, but that's not the same as if I ask that homeless person, what feels like what's next to you?
Right.
Here you are with nothing. What's next?
And if you find that that they're so trapped in a sense of drowning in it, in this feeling, what do you do to give them a question or a sense of alternative to being?
Then you're up against the issue of choice and willingness. There's a choice point here, clearly, because life has come to a screeching halt as we know it. And that's something that's apparent, and it isn't something that person needs to admit. However, if we're asking what's next, we're asking that person to start to be willing to feel into the next move. And if it isn't here right this second and we get, I don't know, and all of that, then we're going to ask that person to just sit with it and just sit on their porch or sit on the curb or wherever they spend their days, trying to feel into what's next.